Traditional history relies on long, comfortable continuities. We track the slow evolution of ideas, group texts into grand traditions, and build timelines that march neatly from one century to the next. To make sense of the scattered artifacts of the past, we rely on the concept of the author. We assume a single unifying consciousness. A brilliant mind like Charles Darwin acts as the organizing center for a collection of diverse writings. We apply this same artificial order to the physical book. We treat an author's complete works as a coherent whole, stitching together published treatises, scattered rough drafts, and private letters, as if they all express a single, continuous inner truth. Michel Foucault argues these categories are ideological tools. They are designed to protect the sovereignty of human consciousness, ensuring that no matter how chaotic events become, human agency remains at the center of the historical narrative. To perform actual historical archaeology, we must suspend these comforting syntheses. We have to strip away the categories of the author, the book, and the tradition, and confront the raw, dispersed facts of history exactly as they appear. Once we clear away those unities, we are left with a specific raw material, the statement. A statement in this sense is not a grammatical sentence or a logical proposition. It is a highly specific, localized historical event. Traditional history of thought tries to look through the statement. It attempts to decipher the silent murmurs of the author's mind or the hidden intentions buried in the text. Foucault demands we look at the statement, not through it. Discourse does not function as a transparent window sitting between the observer and a pre-existing reality. Instead, statements group together according to strict, anonymous rules. Foucault calls the resulting system a discursive formation. This formation dictates the conditions under which anything can be said, related, or transformed within a specific discipline. To understand how this works, we will map the exact topological architecture of a discursive formation from the ground up, examining its three structural pillars. Discourse operates as an active, rule-governed practice. It establishes the very objects it addresses, defining their boundaries and conditions of existence from within the documentary material itself. The first rule of formation governs how objects of knowledge come into existence. To see this, we can examine the 19th century medical discipline of psychopathology, which constructed the object of madness. Conditions like criminality, neurosis, or monomania did not wait in a state of suspended animation for doctors to discover them. They required a complex set of relations to emerge as objects of study. The first vector of this formation is the surface of emergence. Phenomena only become visible when they deviate from the norms of highly specific social margins, such as the family, the religious community, or the penal system. The second vector is the authority of delimitation. Society grants recognized institutions, like the medical profession or the legal system, the exclusive power to name, diagnose, and legally isolate these deviations. This 19th century asylum floor plan illustrates physical delimitation. Heavy boundary walls isolate the patient. Inside lies the third vector, grids of specification. Wards are rigidly categorized, separating quiet from noisy, male from female, mirroring the conceptual systems used to classify symptoms. An object of discourse, therefore, is the exact topological relation intersecting these three vectors. It is the specific point where a social surface, an institutional authority, and a grid of specification meet. Madness is a geometric construct. It is locked into existence by a specific grid of social and institutional relations, entirely dependent on the discursive practice that makes it visible. If the object of study is a construct, we must turn to the speaker who wields the authority to study it. Clinical discourse does not originate from a single brilliant mind. The speaker is a dispersed function, occupying necessary nodes within a larger system. Foucault calls the rules governing these nodes enunciative modalities. They define exactly who is allowed to use this specific language and under what conditions. The first modality is the legally sanctioned status of the speaker. A 19th century doctor possesses criteria of competence, a defined societal contract, and an institutional right to make decisions regarding health and punishment. Medical statements cannot come from just anyone. The second modality is the institutional site. A doctor observing a patient in a private practice generates one type of discourse. Moving that same doctor to a teaching hospital, a site of quantified data and statistical averages, alters the rules of the discourse entirely. Here, in the 19th century laboratory, the clinical gaze is fully operationalized. The spatial arrangement of the men, the chemical instruments, and the organic specimens turns the site into an engine for generating experimental data rather than a place of passive observation. The third modality is the position of the subject. The doctor must constantly shift roles according to a grid of interrogations, operating as a direct questioner, a visual observer at optimal distance, or an instrument-wielding decipherer of tissues. The famed medical gaze is a complex network of institutional and spatial positions. To produce valid clinical discourse, the speaker must occupy these exact coordinates. The final rule of formation governs the architecture of concepts. Rather than a stone-by-stone construction of an edifice, we find a dispersion of ideas that do not always obey laws of progressive refinement. Beneath the visible concepts lies the preconceptual field. This is an anonymous matrix of constraints that dictates how statements can coexist, overlap, or exclude one another. This classical natural history diagram demonstrates conceptual organization. It displays the rigid disaggregation of plant parts into numbered data points. Through the rules of succession, these elements are forcibly rewritten. Qualitative observations are translated into the strict grids of a classificatory table. Then come the rules of coexistence. Statements map out fields of presence, acting as models, analogical confirmations, or verifications for one another across entirely different domains of knowledge. Finally, the rules of intervention determine how these concepts are manipulated. They dictate how a statement is translated, how its exactitude is approximated, and how its domain of validity is extended or restricted. This preconceptual field acts uniformly on anyone who attempts to speak within the discipline. It does not care about the individual genius or the personal intentions of the botanist. These anonymous structural limits dictate what can possibly be thought in a given epoch. Consequently, concepts emerge from discursive regularities, not from a logical, progressive genesis of ideas. We have now mapped the three structural pillars of Foucault's system: the formation of objects, the modalities of speakers, and the organization of concepts. This visualization maps the complete epistemological architecture, a three-dimensional spatial grid where planes of objects, nodes of speakers, and structural matrices of concepts lock together. This intersecting structure functions externally to the human mind, maintaining geometric rigidity entirely at the level of discursive practice. This topological map replaces the romantic teleology of human progress with a cold, rigorous system of local constraints. Recognizing this architecture corrects a major academic error, treating Foucault's work as merely a study of linguistics, grammar, or vocabulary. Discourse isn't just the simple intersection of a chaotic reality, things, and a structured lexicon, words. Foucault's title is ironic. A glowing scaffolding, discursive practice, acts as a prism, actively distorting and reshaping words and things before they can even touch. We are not looking for a silent, hidden meaning buried beneath the text. We do not simply treat the historical document as the lingering language of a human voice since reduced to silence. All the rules of formation, the limits, the thresholds, and the grids operate strictly on the visible, manifest surface of the discourse itself. Discourse functions as a practice that systematically forms its own objects. This goes beyond the simple use of signs to designate things, creating a level of regularity that is irreducible to language alone. Michel Foucault built this system to throw off the constraints of anthropological thought. This methodological shift provokes extreme anxiety from traditional historians because it removes the guarantee that human consciousness is the sovereign subject of history. Without that sovereign subject, history offers no safe shelter. It's no continuous narrative of progress, nor a promise of restored unity. The uncompromising objective of archaeology is to map the constraints of knowledge strictly through the dispersion of statements, entirely bypassing the humanistic search for origins. By dismantling the illusion of historical continuity, Foucault exposes the structural machinery that dictates the limits of truth in any given epoch.